What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Get Paid for Your Pad. Today, we are doing part 2 of how to improve your listings search rank in Airbnb categories. As you know, Airbnb came out with a big update that they called the Airbnb Summer Release 2022, completely revamped the whole search functionality in Airbnb. So last week, myself and Mr. Kelvin Mah spoke about this. And today we're doing a part 2. So Kelvin, welcome back.
Hello, pleasure to be back.
It's my pleasure to have you back. We've had a lot of conversations in the last week or so. You also joined one of our calls in the Rising Stars Mastermind, which is our mastermind for Legends X graduates, where we did some live R&D almost, like we went into Airbnb listings and checking out, finding things out, learning on the way as we go. But yeah, today we're gonna do a quick recap of what changed, and then we're gonna dive into some specific topics, such as we're gonna dive into the cover photo and how it sometimes changes, because that's something kind of new that we discovered. We're going to talk about the difference between urban and the traditional vacation rental markets when it comes to the different categories that are available, and a bunch of other good stuff. Are you ready, Kelvin?
Sounds good. Yeah.
All right.
Born ready.
Well, let me let me do a quick recap. Right, Airbnb came out with this big update, and I sent out an email with a summary of like the eight changes that I have seen so far. Number one is the titles of the listings don't show up in the search snippet anymore. Number two is if you search in all homes, the titles now only consist of listing type plus location. Number three is if you search in one of the categories, the title consists of just the location. So not even the listing type, just the location. If you search with no dates, then Airbnb provides a default filter that is any week, anywhere, and it shows the first full week that's available in the search snippet. So Airbnb is gonna assume that you're gonna be looking for a 1 week stay if you're not putting any dates or location in there. And then also it seems like design is the default category, because it's all the way in the left. When you don't put a location, you don't put any dates, you just click that search button. Design is all the way on the left, which is probably because Brian Chesky is a designer, and Airbnb likes to show well-designed units. Number five is the number and type of beds have been added to the search snippet, so that's now become more visible. Number six is, and we'll talk about this, but Airbnb now actually can change the order of your photos. So it might show a different photo in the search results than the first photo you select in your listing. Number seven is your listings can be featured in multiple categories. And then number eight is we have some insight as to how Airbnb determines what listings to show in what categories. Some of them, it's based on the property type that you select in Airbnb. So if you say, hey, this unit is a cabin, then Airbnb is probably going to put it in the cabin category, right? Pretty obvious. But sometimes it's based on an amenity, right? You have grand piano, you have pool, awesome pools or amazing pools or something like that. Obviously, if you don't have that, you're not going to be in that category, right? Or it's location based, like national park or countryside. And then there's some of these random categories like amazing views and off the grid, where it's not completely clear exactly how they determine, who's going to be in there.
OMG.
OMG is another one, right? It's like, I'm sure there's all these Airbnb hosts like they're putting OMG in their captions and their description and in their title, like, oh my God, what an amazing house is this, to hopefully get Airbnb to put them in that category. But yeah, so that's kind of number eight. The last takeaway is, there's different ways that Airbnb determines like what listings go in what categories. So that's kind of my little overview. Do you have anything to add to that, Kelvin?
The only one that I think that's top of my mind right now is the reviews. So the reviews
yes.
have been removed from, or sorry, not the reviews, then the number of reviews has been removed from the search page. So when a person is searching on Airbnb, they're only going to see the star rating. So they might see something like 4.97 stars, but there won't be any number of reviews that are attributed to this this listing. This listing specifically.
Yeah, that's a really good one. I have to add that to my list. Why do you think Airbnb did that? Do they want to give new listings a better chance to compete with the listings that have like 200 reviews?
Yeah, I do think so. Yeah, I think part of the update is, when they remove certain things and they remove some of the specialized items, such as your title. Your title can certainly help with getting the idea across. Just like how if you are looking at a property, or sorry, you're looking at an area and it's maybe just two of you that are looking for a place, and you're seeing a bunch of apartments and they all look kind of similar. You can't really use the reviews anymore, so you kind of have to go by look at this point right now. Photos are almost this like 10x change that it's not that they've reintroduced, but they've almost sort of doubled down on the importance of that.
Yeah 100%. The photos are now everything, and we'll later in this podcast I'll give you a similar list of like action steps that I think you can take to kind of optimize your listing given the new search functionality. But before we dive into that, let's talk about the cover photo, because that's something that I think you may have mentioned that last week when we were talking. But we've now confirmed that I've seen several cases of this. It seems like this is they only do it if you're searching in a category, not all homes. Is that what you've seen as well?
Yeah, that's what I've seen. That's what I've seen as well. And just to continue on there with those photos. So let's pretend you're in a city and you're looking at pools. So pools would be amazing pools. That's a category there. You go and you click on some listings, and I wouldn't say it's a trick necessarily, but what happens is that you'll click that listing, and then we'll click any listing, and you'll notice that cover photo is a pool, but you'll probably also notice the URL at the very top of the page is very, very long. So what Airbnb is doing now is that even if you click onto the page from the category section and you click onto the page, then the cover photo will actually be the bigger photo there, or sorry, the category photo will be the bigger cover photo there. But if you get rid of if you clean up that URL structure there, and you just have those listing ID numbers at the very end there, and you kind of refresh the page, you might be able to see that there's a difference there. So when Airbnb, what they're doing is they're adjusting the cover photo so that it matches the category when they click through from the category end. Hopefully that wasn't too confusing, but they're just trying to match. They're just trying to match what people see when they're clicking to actually what's appearing there on the listing photo. But it's not the photo that the host chose as their cover photo.
Gotcha. So you're saying that if you were to remove all the stuff that they put on the URL and just go back to airbnb.com/rooms/the number, the photo must change?
Yes.
That's true. I'm doing it right now. You're right. You're absolutely right. It does change. That's crazy. I didn't know that. Well, there you go. That's why I invite you in the podcast. To teach me stuff like that.
Nerd, just a nerd here, so.
But that's interesting. Yeah. And so as you were explaining it, it makes a lot of sense, right? Because like Airbnb, I can imagine they're thinking, okay, let's create a category, amazing pools. But then you search in that category and then you see all these listings that have a cover photo that's not the pool. Right. So then Airbnb steps in and says like, all right, let's show the pool picture instead of all the other pictures. So that's really interesting. That's really interesting. Anyway, that's good to know. And we had a call with our Rising Stars Mastermind on, when was it? Last week on Thursday, right?
Yep.
And we had somebody, as one of our students, who actually had a listing where the same thing was happening. Right, he has a lakefront, and even though the picture that he chose was actually like, it was a full-on picture of the lake, but still Airbnb chose a different one, which was kind of interesting because in that picture that Airbnb chose, there was actually less lake in the photo, but you did see the house and a piece of the lake in the photo. So maybe the argument is, oh, we don't want people to just put a picture of a lake. We want to show that the house is actually on the lake, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, it makes sense to me because I was there, so I did see it, and I think the cover photo that he had was, it was pretty nice. I think it was two chairs, and
Yeah.
then facing the lake, and it was a nice blue lake. But the alternative photo that Airbnb had chosen was with the house in the background and kind of like the sandier part of the lake that you could see there, just the beachy part. I thought the other photo was nicer, right, personally.
Yeah, I thought so too. But I imagine that Airbnb doesn't have the staff to review all these listings, because I mean, how many listings are there? Like 6 million or something. Like, they don't have enough people to go for all these listings and pick the right photos. So I imagine what they do is they probably have an algorithm, right, that determines like these pictures.
Yeah. I mean, they definitely have an algorithm to select the photos, but I also think that they're probably rotating through a bunch of photos too, because in that example that we saw, that was just one instance of time where we saw that photo was the cover photo was being replaced with one photo. But in this person's example, pretty much all of his photos were of the lake. I think maybe the first 10 were mostly about the lake, so they could have chose any other one. And I do kind of think that they're probably rotating things, because right now you have to think too that Airbnb is going through this big PR push, and they're still sending out emails. Like, I'm in Canada, so we got our email a little bit later than the people in the US got theirs, and even like the way that they changed domains, that took a little bit of time too. So I'm sure they're just still kind of going through this process of releasing the feature and updating everyone as well. And there's all these articles that were released, so all these people were going there, and I have a feeling that when there's more traffic that's going to the website, there's more rotating of the listings, like in terms of their rank, but also like in terms of their photos now too, because I mean, it makes sense. They need to collect more data.
Yeah. And you know what, like, I'm going to do something fun here for the people that are watching on YouTube. I'm going to share my screen real quick, and I'm going to show how the listing, the cover photo changes when you change that URL. So if you're listening to this podcast, go check out YouTube. Just Google "Get Paid for Your Pet" YouTube. You'll find this episode. And what I'm going to show here is I'm in the search results. I'm clicking on this listing that has a beautiful pool, and I click on the listing, and I'm looking at the photo collage, the 5 photos on the front page, and there's that same picture of the beautiful pool. But now I go to the URL and I remove all the stuff that's behind the room number, press enter, and boom, completely different picture. And that's not a very attractive picture. In this case, I think Airbnb did a very good job.
I agree.
Because like that picture does not look that attractive, and that pool looked amazing. But the picture of the pool is actually the second from last on this listing. Which brings me to a whole other topic, which is how to order your photos. And I think that's become more important now. Like, as you mentioned, photos are everything now. The number of reviews have disappeared in the search snippet. The title has disappeared. So people are going to completely go off the photos now. And so you gotta really make sure that the first photo is your most attractive photo, and that the first, like, let's say 5 photos are all showing a highlight of your listing, right? It's really like you want to make sure that the person that goes to your page now and looks at those or even scrolls through the photos in the search snippet, in the search results, you got to grab their attention as soon as possible, right? Don't put your best photo as second from last, like this particular host did, because like you're gonna lose a lot of people before they even get to that picture, right? So you gotta show those awesome pictures, the best you have. Like you gotta show them first.
Yeah, and even though Airbnb is pulling out that cover photo there, I don't think I've seen an example yet where they've rearranged all the photos themselves. It's like they've just replaced the first one with a different one, and then everything afterwards is in order
Yeah.
of the way that you generally want it. And if you could think of, we're always trying to think about conversions and things like that. So and usually we talk about the click-through rate, right? So the click-through rate is this conversion where it's when somebody sees your property on the listing and then they click through to get onto your listing page. But even before that, there's kind of a micro conversion there, right? I mean, and generally you have to convert them to stop and look at your listing first. That's the first part of the cover photo. But then there's a micro conversion where you actually have to get them to click the view all, like, to click through on those photos to scroll through the little thumbnail there. I think it's pretty rare to go and click the whole page when, but most people I think nowadays know that clicking the photos on the side there of the thumbnail, you can kind of rotate those around. So that's that little mini conversion that Jasper's talking about there.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing to note as well, actually, is that the photos, they show up as squares in the search results now. They used to show up more as a rectangle size, right? So you got to also now think about, how do those first 5 photos look in the actual search results. So I think that's a good exercise to do is find your own listing in the search results and literally like pretend you're a guest looking for somewhere to stay and scroll through those photos as Kelvin mentioned, and you might find that some photos might look good full size, but in a little square it might look very different, like certain part might be cut off, for example, right? So yeah. I think that's a really good exercise to go through for everybody.
Yeah, don't forget about mobile too, or maybe you're thinking about mobile, but don't forget about desktop. Check both versions.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. Yeah. Let's talk about urban versus traditional vacation rental areas. You mentioned that that there's a bit of a difference between those two markets when it comes to like the categories, right?
Yeah. When it comes down to the categories, at least my experience, just kind of coming at it from a guest perspective, but also trying to take into account the host perspective, is that I think categories are more important for traditional vacation rental areas. And maybe that's something maybe you guys already realize that, but for me sometimes it takes a little bit of time to realize a lot of these situations, because everyone's in different situations, right? So we've, at least when it comes down to a Rankbreeze user, there could be in a vacation rental market or be in an urban area. So the categories I think are a little, you can kind of, I think they become more important. The categories become more important in the traditional vacation rental market, where there's cabins, and maybe perhaps if we're talking about a beach area too, that's also vacation rental area. But when it comes down to like an urban city, the categories are, I don't think they're as important, but in some cases, some of the categories are extremely important, because there's only so when it comes down to a person who specifically has to stay inside of a city. I've seen it where when you go to a particular city, the first one that's recommended to you, the first category that's recommended to you is the countryside category, which is hilarious to me because it's kind of, I feel like there's better ways to optimize that, and I'm sure over time these things will kind of sort themselves out and whatnot. But right now, that's kind of the one thing I've noticed, is that it's recommending countryside, but I'm trying to stay in the city. But when it comes down to those categories, there's only a few that are there's only a few that are possible to get into without, you know, structurally changing your property, right? Like you can't convert a apartment condo into a yurt. So you have to work with the categories that are there. And some of those categories are design, amazing view is one. A little bit difficult, you know, if you don't have an amazing view, certainly that you can't just write amazing view. And if people are looking,
you can blow up like the building and that's blocking the view, right?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. I'm sure
kidding.
there's some construction people that are listening, and yeah, I am also kidding too. I don't want. Yeah, yeah. So view pool is another one. You can't really necessarily, but maybe that can adjust the way that you go and get more properties as well. Maybe that becomes something that you're looking for more of. Chef's kitchen may be possible. I think design's probably the one that's the most interesting though to think about, because in a sense anybody could be in the design category, really, right? But it's very rare to. I mean, I've looked at a bunch of different listings. Not all of them say design necessarily on them, but you know, it's very similar to somebody looking for a property that's off the grid. What is this person looking for? It's the same thing with design. When they're looking in there, maybe they're not thinking of good design. Not everyone has that artsy understanding of things, but you know, they probably know the words like beautiful or decor or stylish, modern. These are certain terms that are easy to pick up on, that most of the time a property that is well designed will also have in their descriptions and in their title and certainly in their reviews.
Yeah, and it's interesting to compare like city versus traditional vacation rental market, because I'm looking at New York, for example, and I'm also looking at where I am right now in Panama, and here I can see like so many categories. Like I can press the little arrow to the right to scroll to the next, you know, the next page of categories 5 times or something. Whereas in New York, I press that little arrow once and then we're already done. So there's way fewer categories in the big cities, as you mentioned. But what's interesting is, you know, there's in New York, there's a category called surfing. So
I just saw that.
Yeah, I'm looking at that and I'm like, and I'll share my screen again for those who are watching on YouTube. But I click on surfing because I was like, I didn't know there was any surfing in New York City. Like I must have missed that last time I was there. I didn't see any waves, but then you click on it and ta-la, it recommends places in like, I don't know, was that Philadelphia? Like near, well, you know, on the beach, obviously, like to the east of Philadelphia. I don't know what state that is. Is that still New York State? I don't know actually. But I mean, the point is it's recommending places way far from New York City. Right. So the map just completely zooms out. So that's kind of interesting. So, you know, there's not a lot of categories in the cities, and then even the categories that are there, like you click on them and it has to zoom out to like multiple states to even suggest some you know, some listings in that area. Grand pianos. There's a couple grand pianos in New York. Like that's a really interesting listing. Like I was kind of surprised to see that, but I guess there are people who love to play the piano, and if you love to play the piano, then I guess you want to stay somewhere where you can play.
Yeah, definitely. While you were doing that though, that kind of was making me think of another point around urban areas. So yes, there's the categories. There's only a certain number of categories that are probably important for somebody that's in an urban area, but as a guest, you're only going to click those. You're only going to click surfing and the other categories so many times before you essentially just give up and say, okay, well, let's just go back to all homes and do it the old school way.
Yeah, the only person that I would see clicking on surfing when you're looking in New York would probably be somebody who lives in New York and who's like, hey, I'm in New York and I want to go surfing. What's the nearest place?
Yeah, for sure. Actually, yeah, that's a good inverse thought of it for sure. But in some ways, yeah, I guess now it's kind of circling back then the all homes categories is what we were doing before, but it's still very important. I think that was kind of one of the things that over the past week, it's kind of been this commotion around, oh no, like now Airbnb's introduced all these categories and it's terrible. And in some ways I understand what people are saying, but just when you actually go and you search for things as a guest there, it's very apparent that a guest can only go so far in those categories, especially if they're looking to stay in an urban area. They're just going to revert back to all homes, and hopefully that's clear. I think Airbnb could make that a lot clearer personally. Let's say you clicked in 3 different categories and then it just noticed that you clicked 3 times and had to zoom into New York each time just to see it. Hopefully they pick up on that they just transport you back over to the all homes category. I think that's a nice little UX touch that they could probably do.
Yeah, that would be nice. Other question for you. When it comes to those categories, like some are all the way on the left. I imagine that it's more valuable to be in a category that's visible, in the first sort of, how do you say that, the first batch, or, the first categories that are by default visible on the Airbnb website. You don't have to scroll through to find them. Do you think there's a big difference between the order?
I actually have an alternative thought around that. The Airbnb is just in a learning phase right now, and if I were them, I would probably be measuring each city, for example, let's say New York, and optimizing the page based on the highest click-through rates. So since these are new categories here, and you are a person searching in New York itself, I feel like these categories could self-organize themselves eventually at some point by click-through rate, which would kind of say what is the most popular, potentially. So then, and I'm a little surprised that they're not already doing that actually, that it's not self-updating. For example, I believe at the very end, when I searched New York, I've got some probably different settings than you do, Jasper, but at the very end we've got amazing views, and I know for sure New York has like some amazing views somewhere in that big city there. So having it at the very end doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, because I think it's probably one of the more valuable ones that they could move up there. So I don't know how they organize it. I would just think that they could organize it better by measuring click-through rates.
I agree, man. Like, because I'm looking at this too, and I see amazing views is all the way on the right. It's even before skiing. I mean, not before, after skiing. So like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, no one's going to New York City to ski. Everybody wants an amazing view. So I agree. Those, but we'll see. We'll see if Airbnb is gonna rearrange the order of those categories over time. Right now, it seems like they're fixed, because I'm seeing the same as you. So based on our experiment of 2 data points, we can conclude that they're very very sophisticated research here. Cool, man. Well, let's wrap this up, because we've been talking for quite a while. I wanted to kind of share the 5 things that I think everybody can do right now or in the future to kind of optimize their listings. And then Kelvin, I'd love to hear from you if you think these are good tips or not. Number 1 is, first of all, and we mentioned this, you really want to look at the categories of your location and decide like which ones do you want to focus on, which ones do you want to show up in. And then I would go into your Airbnb listing and just make sure that you have the correct property type selected. Because this is much more important now to select the right property type than before, right? So some people might have not given it a lot of thought. So if that's the case, go back in there and make sure you select the correct property type. And then number 3 is and you've been mentioning this, like add as much content as possible that will help Airbnb understand where to put your listing, right? So as you mentioned, if you want to be an off the grid, don't just, stuff your description with off the grid, off the grid, off the grid, but talk about the cinnamons, talk about like what words relate to that concept, right? Like remote, peaceful, quiet, perfect for disconnecting, stuff like that. Number 4 is investing in some amenities that could rank you for one of these categories could be a good investment, right? We talked about piano, buy a piano now. I mean, that could be a profitable investment now. A pool, right? A pool is always good, but now even better. But even like something simple, like let's say you're on the beach, there's some surfing nearby. If you buy maybe a couple surfboards, that might help you rank for that category as well. And that's not really that expensive, right? So really taking a look at those amenities and see if you can invest in some of those. And then lastly, it's just like doubling down on the photos, right? What we just mentioned, and making sure that your best photos are those first 5.
Yeah, no, yeah, for sure. I absolutely agree with those. The 2 things maybe sticking out to me are if you have a view, of course, I would double down and maybe just re-audit that view a little bit, because you can go into Airbnb and go into the scenic view section, and I believe they allow you to check multiple views, so you could have like a mountain view and a valley view at the same time too, right? So there is potential to check off multiple items there, and again, yeah, I guess that's also feeding Airbnb more information. And if you've got like 4 views, potential for 4 views, you should definitely be using that. And I would assume it's very hard for Airbnb to ignore you after that change there. Another thing that I think we talked about in the Legend X Mastermind, the Rising Stars one, was around the potential for branding photos. So right now you've got, you don't really have the ability to use your title, and sometimes it can be hard to get certain things across to somebody scrolling through. So getting creative with the photos. We talked a little bit about banners and things like that, and just making it so you're kind of branding your photo. In some cases that will help people who have multiple properties the most, just because if you kind of brand your photos and then another person, they go to the page, they go to another page, they see your photo there, they might get curious. They'll at least click probably on the photo itself and start to rotate a little bit. They may not click through, but they might click just so so whatever you can do to get that click is probably what I'm trying to say here. And then once that guest has clicked on your property, they will eventually see your property again when they come back to Airbnb. It's not too often. I don't know what the stats are. I think the stats are probably a little bit different now, but it used to take, I think it was like on average 2 or 3 days for an Airbnb guest to actually make a booking decision. I don't know what that's like now with these new changes, but ultimately Airbnb's goal is to shorten that in general anyways, even though they've made these changes and it may have made it longer. They're going to try to re-optimize things to make it a lot shorter for a guest to make that booking decision. And then but yeah, so then you can, when you're getting that click, just have to think, you can try and work with the personalization that's being added while a guest is searching. When they come back, they're going to see your property right there on the first page for sure, usually. And yeah, I think that's what I've got in my mind. I did a category update. So if you go like Rankbreeze, if you look up Rankbreeze and then look up Airbnb category, there's probably going to be a blog post up there. And in that blog post, there's a lot of the stuff that Jasper talked about, some of the stuff that I'm talking about here. It's a good little recap. I'm trying to update it as well, like along the way as things evolve and things like that. So yeah, there's feel free to bookmark that.
Awesome. So yeah, let's talk about Rankbreeze real quick before we wrap this up. So you're obviously the CEO founder of Rankbreeze. How does Rankbreeze help Airbnb hosts?
Yeah. So Rankbreeze right now, because we've got these new updates, right? So there's the category things. That stuff is not really in place right now. So I'll go forward with that. But in general, everything that we do is mostly in the all homes category, which is still important, right? Especially probably if you're in the urban areas. I think it's maybe even more important than it was before. But what we deal with is rankings, pricing, and market data. So rankings is where you rank, how to improve your search visibility. Pricing, probably don't need to dive into that, but what's the best price to choose for your property. And the market data is where to invest, what it's like to monitor a particular area for occupancy rates, things like that. And usually what happens is that when somebody comes in, there's not necessarily anything to worry about in terms of integrations. You just kind of sign up, and then you'll paste your Airbnb listing URL or your host URL, and then we'll start our work on our end. And you'll see some demos when you arrive. And usually, the first thing that people go to is this thing called the optimization hub. And that's a bunch of small tools that are around listing optimization. That's what that is. So and that's probably a good wrap up for what we do, I think.
Awesome. So rankbreeze.com is where you can find all this good stuff. Kelvin, thank you so much, man. It's been a pleasure to have you on again. I'm sure we'll talk in the future. And to the listeners, thank you for listening or watching on YouTube. As I mentioned, you can watch all the podcast episodes on YouTube. So that's then when we're sharing the screen, you can see what we're talking about. So thanks for listening or watching, and we'll see you next time.